Dear friends and colleagues, it's a great pleasure to be here with you today and to have the opportunity to support the Iranian resistance movement. For a number of years, while I was an MEP, we met regularly with Maryam Rajavi in Brussels and in Strasbourg to support the cause of freedom for Iran. And it is good to see so many former colleagues here today. We often criticized the way the European Union at the time pursued a policy of appeasement with Iran and with the mullah's regime. So it was a very significant step when Ursula von der Leyen, as President of the European Commission, adopted a very different approach and stood with the brave women of Iran. And it is very important that Europe and the international community continue to support demands for democracy, for freedom, and for equality in Iran. It is wonderful that women and the younger generation of girls are at the forefront of protests in Iran. It shouldn't surprise us that they are, because it is women who have been leading the organized Iranian opposition, the PMOI, MEK, and the NCRI for the last 44 years. The women of Iran are challenging the regime every day with organized resistance and civil disobedience, making great personal sacrifices. Such brave women and such a contrast to the misogynist rulers of Iran. The Iranian regime clearly sees women and girls as a serious threat to their grip on power. So they reduce them to second-class citizens in both law and practice. The Iranian resistance movement, the NCRI, on the contrary, sees women and girls as the driving force for change and the guarantors of a free, democratic, and secular republic. In Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan, Article 5 states complete gender equality in the realms of political, social, cultural, and economic rights, and equal participation of women in political leadership, abolishment of any form of discrimination, the right to choose one's own clothing freely, the right to freely marry and divorce as a woman, as an individual, and to obtain, I've lost my place, forgive me, and to obtain education and employment. And also prohibition of all forms of exploitation against women under any pretext. Mrs. Rajavi and her 10-point democratic platform will transform Iran and the Middle East if and when it is implemented, because it gives women the opportunity to shape the future of their country. The people on the streets of Iran clearly support Mrs. Rajavi's democratic platform, and this should be recognized and supported and endorsed by the international community. It is really heartening to hear parliamentarians from many European countries endorsing this movement in their statements. As long as the current regime in Iran is in power, Iran will stand for human rights abuse, for torture, for mass executions, and for terrorism. This in no way represents the people of Iran or their aspirations. The Iranian people's desire is to overthrow the regime and to establish a secular and democratic republic. This is shown by their anti-regime protests. So the international community must realize that and stand with the Iranian people and Mrs. Rajavi to make this day come sooner rather than later. The EU and the UK have a responsibility and a moral duty to hold the Iranian regime to account and bring the regime's leaders to justice. They can do it in a number of ways, by referring the regime to the UN Security Council, by recognizing Maryam Rajavi and her 10-point platform as an obvious democratic replacement to the regime, by assisting Iranians and the Iranian resistance who are seeking justice under universal jurisdiction in Europe. And most importantly, they can proscribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, and designate it as the terrorist organization that we all know it is. My friends, with the strength of the Iranian resistance and the leadership of Maryam Rajavi, I have great hope and belief that the end of the mullah's regime is in sight, and we will soon see a democratic and free Iran. Thank you.